So let's go ahead and start. Eric is real good about making sure I start on time here.
Congratulations.
So we have Member President Arlene Boardman,
Yes,
Carrie Snow,
Yes.
Glenn Pepper,
he's excused.
Jenna Reed, yes, and Melissa Berry.
Yes.
We don't have Josh Stransky anymore.
He has resigned.
And then Staff President Harold Dominguez, Molly O'Donnell, Lauren Sully, and Sarah Arney.
Okay. All right, let's move on to approving the minutes for the March meeting. I just have one addition that I would like to have put in there, and that is that, let's put in there that Josh resigned due to current job commitments, current employment commitments, I guess. Yeah. So then I need, anybody else? Okay, I need motion to approve.
I'll do that.
Melissa?
Share a second.
Carrie? All in favor? Okay.
My constituent is going to be my
Minutes have passed. Public invited to be heard, which we don't always usually have. We need to drum up some.
I started putting these meetings in the newsletter, so if people want to attend, they'll know. Just for
That's great, thank you.
That's the exciting.
We'll see. That would be interesting if they came. Anyway, okay. Organizational updates.
I'm going to take this first one, Arlene.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so the application period ends April 18th for the vacancies that we have on this board. The process, I was just reviewing it right before we got down here. So just a reminder for the process, first, a couple board members do the first round interviews, and then council selects the method of interview that they're going to do. One time it was everyone. Last time it was just the recommended top candidates from the advisory board members.
I think that's
Have you
the way
heard
they're
that?
going to
Do it
keep
going
it, because
forward?
I think the first time they got it backwards. They wanted to do the recommended, but then,
I see.
but we'll double check with Dawn.
Okay.
I think they'll be the same.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the appointments will happen at a regular session in June on a city council session,
Okay.
where they'll adjourn as city council, come on as LHA board just to do the appointments.
Okay.
So we would, to prepare for that, those interviews would probably be happening potentially end of April, depending on schedule, certainly by early May. Arlene, remind me, I think we just had 2 people the last couple times volunteering to do it. It was both of you, right?
Yeah, that's what we've had, yeah.
Okay. So I think we'd be looking for 2 volunteers, and we can work around schedules to set those. I do not yet know how many applicants we already have in the hopper. Erica, do you have access to that?
No.
Okay.
I went and looked at it like a week ago, and it didn't show any availability for Longmont Housing Authority to even apply, like all the other
Right.
ones did, but this one
Because it goes through LHA, they want it all to go through the LHA website, and it's a little bit more of a manual process that way.
I couldn't figure it out, so hopefully
Okay.
people can.
You might want to touch base with Dawn.
Yeah,
Because it's not actually on the city website where the other ones are.
right. So we sent out, well, it's posted on the LHA website, and I think that when I checked, I thought it said refer to the LHA website, but let me double check that. But I'll just touch base with Dawn after this and just make sure.
I'll do it real quick. I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so would you like to select volunteers now? Because our next meeting would be too late.
I'm happy to do it. It's just I'm going to be out of the city 25th through the 2nd. But if it's not those days, I'm happy to.
Okay.
I'm happy to help too.
Okay. So between the 25th, prior to the 25th, is there a good day of week that works for you?
I think I can be flexible.
Between the 18th and the 25th, I should say.
Other than the 25th, I can be flexible as well.
Okay. Let's see, we'll get those on Friday the 18th, so between the 21st and the 24th. I have sat in on this in the past. Sometimes there were two LHA staff
I thought
members.
council wanted the liaisons to do
Okay.
it, to sit in as well, but double check that. But
Okay.
if the entire board wants to do it, you all can do it too. There's only, what, there's 4 of you guys?
There's
Yeah.
actually
Right
five.
now.
There's
Yeah.
five.
Yeah.
Oh,
Excuse.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
So we
kicked
need at
them out.
least 2. More is fine
Yeah.
if y'all want to.
Well, you got two, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have the 2 minimum.
Do you want to do as well, Ellie? And then I've got, but you're doing
got
it,
your-
applying, right?
I
And-
haven't.
And then Glenn
But-
is applying as well, so it'd be the 3 of us if we wanted all 3. But like, I'm not trying to like pressure you. I'm just saying if you
Yeah.
wanted to jump in and do it.
Well, I don't know if you want to do
obviously.
2 or 3. I mean,
It's all
however it
good.
works out, it's fine with me.
Yeah.
I can or I can wait.
I think it worked well with 2. I think that was fine.
Yeah, I did it with 2.
Yeah, it works
Yeah.
fine with
So
2.
it was good.
I've
You guys
done-
aren't chomping to
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
You're okay with that?
You guys know what you're looking
Okay.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was someone is stuck on it, but really wants to.
Well, my foot is not out there.
Okay, cool. It's somebody see.
We're good.
Good.
Okay. So just as a reminder, we'd be doing, we have 2 vacancies, and then also Jenna's term ends June 30th, so we would be looking at 3. Okay, how does Monday afternoon, the 21st look?
I can do that.
Me too.
Okay, great. Maybe starting at 2 o'clock, would that be okay?
Sure.
Is that really not a nice little opening? All right, I will set that up and get it on your calendars, and then we'll confirm the board liaison for staff side.
And it will be here, right? I think that's where.
Yes, I'll set up a room here.
Okay.
We've done it in this room in the past, so
Yeah.
after this meeting, I'll make sure that's available. Okay? Do you have any
Are we
other
gonna
questions about that?
Okay. Are we going to review this interview, though, or are we?
You let me know if you'd like to. We looked at it so we rewrote it 2 elections ago. Looked at it last time and said it looked good. Would this board like to relook at it again? And I can send it back around to the group as well.
Well, I just,
Didn't we have
some of the questions sort of seem to be the same.
Okay.
And I was wondering, this is just my thoughts. Under the third one, which is what is the purpose of the housing authority? I'm wondering if we should add underneath that, some little, maybe 3 different things, which would be, what do you know about, what are the challenges and what is the hope for the future? And then that way it takes those 2 out, but puts them underneath this, which maybe you're not asking. I think it was kind of asking the same question each time. What does anybody else think? Did you all review these?
Mm-hmm. My.
Do you know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine is just a little bit of the ordering, just that I thought it flowed better a little bit, like switching the second and third. But again, because it sounds like the
Mhm.
second one is explaining what the third one's trying to get at. And then I do like the future, the challenges.
These are simple enough changes that I'm just making notes here, but if you'd like to do any more, like do red lines, then you're welcome to do that and send them my way.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that order too because it's lowering the skills.
Jenna, did you get anything?
Yeah, I think that one that we talked about last time, probably they're answering the same question.
Yeah.
They were giving the same answer because we kind of asked the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that is okay.
I think just if you have any other suggestions, just send them my way by maybe the end of next week. Okay?
Okay. Okay. Are you the next one to
Yes.
reschedule the November meeting?
We had our administrative staff preparing calendars, and we realized that the November meeting is booked for Veterans Day, and we will be closed that day. So I thought we could, while we have calendars very mostly free this far in advance, let's go ahead and set a replacement day for that.
So what works well for the city council? Does it make any difference? I mean, if we do it on the 4th, it's right after this.
What we're doing for the November meetings for city council is all the Tuesday meetings are moving to Mondays instead.
Oh, okay.
So we could either do
Okay.
Monday the 10th or the Monday before the 4th, or any, Tuesday the 4th or the 5th, whichever. That is election day.
Or go the
Tuesday
week
the
after
4th,
the
excuse me.
18th.
So the options are looking at the week of the 3rd to the 7th or doing Monday the 10th.
Mondays are great with me. Tuesday mornings are great with me.
Okay.
Actually, Wednesdays are great too.
Yeah, Mondays would be best, but I think I'm pretty flexible.
Monday's good.
Monday the 10th? Let's see. Yeah, we should. Yeah, let's just do that. Same time, 9 to 11, okay?
Yeah.
Erica, do you mind moving that for us and also moving our LG chicken? Thank you. All right. That was it for that one.
Okay. Development and project updates.
So, for development updates, Ascent construction is speeding right along. We're not officially ahead of schedule, but it is. The crews out there, we have such a big crew, it's just really exciting to watch. We started doing site walks, just verifying structural stuff before they get too far along. And we're picking finishes and that type of thing now. So that's moving right along and going great. I will say we walked the 4-bedroom unit. It is huge. It is so exciting to see that. All the guys working on the construction side are like, we have never built this before. It was pretty cool. So everything going well with Ascent. We are carefully working with Wild Plum to prepare for the ECE to open as well. Lease up, of course. We've got a schedule working out for lease up on the apartment side, but for the ECE, we're working with Wild Plum to make sure that is as seamless as possible, and really working to make sure that we're going to be able to fill it with children. The problem is we have a CCAP freeze that's been in place for some time, so there's no new CCAP resources for families out there. So right now, unless the freeze lifts, which funding source constraints are not, I don't really hear of anybody opening up funding right now, is having existing CCAP families that are maybe at other centers, trying to see if they are going to try and move over, which really means all we can do is work with the CCAP team at Boulder County to just get the message out that our center is opening. And then Wild Plum also has a backup plan about using Head Start slots that they have also at other centers, but we're working with them, like, how does that work then what does that do to the other center? Making sure that we're not negatively impacting. So that's the kind of stuff we're working on now, and going to start trying to advocate as much as we can for CCAP and how to help make that work. On the Hearthstone and Lodge, we put out a request for proposals for consulting services to help us craft what this project should look like. How big should it be? What should the future financing package look like? And that, I think, in the next few months will really nail down what that project is going to look like, what a timeline looks like, what the budget looks like, all of that. So we're working diligently there.
This is to remodel.
Yes, to exit the HUD program and do a remodel of some scope. We don't know yet if it's a small one or a big one. I would say Aspen Meadows, the flooring replacement started about 3 weeks ago. All the common areas are complete. They started getting into units. Well, they did some vacant units last week, but started getting into occupied units yesterday. So I think that has been it's moving very quickly in terms of getting the crews on site and getting going. But then as they get in and test out the materials and how long it's taking, we're having to adjust schedule a little bit. So we're going to hold another resident meeting here tomorrow to go over where we're at and what it's looking like into the future. Originally, they were thinking that they could do 2 units per day, and after we saw how it was working, we asked them to spread out the schedule, at least to start, to make sure that's realistic before we started messing with everyone's schedules significantly. So the first week of people, it's gonna be a pretty slow process, just making sure that they can get everything done in time. Reasons that things have changed in terms of the pace. They originally were not going to remove the baseboards. They were just going to pull it out and slip it back under. Apparently, it is going to be faster to remove the baseboards, do all the install, put the baseboards back, re-caulk, and touch up paint, which, is a thing. So everything, though, is going well with the contractor, and they're still covering all of this labor and everything, even if the pace changes. What we're doing is we're going to start talking to each tenant that's going out the next week to review their unit, make sure that they've done a pretty good job packing what they can. If they have not been able to, figure out a plan for those people to make sure that we're getting the units ready to go enough so that the work can be done quickly. So we're working that. That will be in progress through at least May, but we're seeing how the pacing goes.
So what are you doing with like big stuff, furniture and all that? Or
They're just moving it to one side of the
That's all
room,
we gotta do.
doing the flooring, moving it back.
that's great, so the residents don't have to
Right.
worry about that. That's
So
great.
really, what we told them, we provided boxes and just said pack loose
Small
items
stuff.
and fragile stuff, things that might fall if they're moving furniture around. So trying to keep it as minimal as possible.
So they're doing everything except the bedrooms, is that correct?
So on the second and third floor, they're doing everything but the bedrooms. On the first floor, they are going to put carpet in the bedrooms that is not currently there because they need that flooring material to salvage and use elsewhere as part of our stock. And the residents are generally happy about getting carpet in the bedrooms on the first floor. It's cozier. But we have a couple residents that have specific requests, and we're doing our best to manage that.
So it looks like you're able to do them in a day. So that are they staying in?
They get to stay in the unit. So if the pace works where it can all be done in a day, then the resident goes out at 8 a.m., comes back at 5, and it's all back to normal. If the pacing stretches past one day, which we're not letting that go as like a here and there. It's more like, okay, you tell us this week how long it takes, and that's the schedule we set going forward, not wishy-washy all the way through. Then they move the items from one half of the apartment, pretty much, which is basically the living room, move it to one side, do that work, move everything back, lay down a piece for the transition. It's only 1/8 of an inch, but we don't want people kicking it and damaging the flooring, and 1/8 of an inch could be a trip hazard, but so lay that down, make sure that's secure, and then the next day come and do the same thing on the other side of the room. Just trying to get through it and get it done.
I'm sure they're eventually going to appreciate it.
They do already in the common areas. They're happy to not see tape on the floor, for sure. So just gotta get through it, and then everyone should be happy. All right, I think that's all I have for development updates, project updates right now. Unless there's any specific questions.
I just, under Ascent, can you give me some sort of an idea of what their licensing allows for children? That would be over there.
Number of kids?
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull that up. It might take me a minute. We haven't looked at that for quite some time. It depends on the age groups that are picked. So that's something we're working with Wild Plum on as well, because we know the highest need is for the lowest ages, more infant care. That's the highest need in the community. Now, how many kids we can actually pull in with the CCAT freeze, and that's something that we're working with Wild Plum to, they're the experts on this, on how to manage that. But I can, in the meantime, pull up what we have on what is allowed, or what is planned at least for the center. We have 3 classrooms.
Would they be limited just to CCAP kids, or can they take?
It has to be income restricted kids,
Okay.
which generally means CCAP or Head Start. That's per our
So
grants.
they can't take like full game?
We cannot do private pay, full private pay.
So is there gonna be a problem if Head Start gets kind of defunded?
Working with Wild Plum to see on that. They've got Head Start slots elsewhere in the community, and they have told us that they will just move some over. But that's my big question, is I want to make sure we're not negatively impacting our operations. And I assume we wouldn't be, or else they wouldn't be proposing that. But that's still the kind of the details that we're getting through with them.
We need to watch time on this, because at some point we could reach out to TLC potentially too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So far, Wild Plum is, well, first of all, Wild Plum's executive director is retiring, and so they're hiring for a replacement. So we're also waiting for that, because we got to build that relationship as well and ensure that everyone is still on board with the plan.
yeah.
But yes, we've always had backup plans in mind if Wild Plum ends up saying we can't do this.
Yeah, just don't let it, let's not let it go too long.
Okay. This might take me a moment, so I might just pop back in and report back on that.
Okay.
If you want to keep moving.
Okay, so then we can move on, or we can just sit here and I'll stare at you while you're.
Move on.
I say go ahead and move on.
Okay, items for input to the Board of Commissioners.
So, the fob policy, this is something I thought of as I've been working through reasonable accommodation requests. The process that we have for reasonable accommodations is one person reviewing all of them, which is daunting for the number we get. There are a lot of restrictions and rules that we've put in place, like no pets, fobs only being given out to residents. If you want an additional one, it has to be a reasonable accommodation request. And what I've seen is that fobs are one of the number 1 requests we get from our properties, with the majority of them being senior. The more I thought about it, it makes sense for this population that they would want someone to have access to the building, which is just the fob to get in to the front door. In case of an emergency, to check on a family member. People fall, people have medical issues. Sometimes they don't turn on their hearing aids and their kids can't get a hold of them and they panic. And it's not from, it's not for the perspective of wasting staff time. That's not really my concern. It's more the dragging out in process of the reasonable accommodation piece. They have to make the request. It goes in a long line of requests that are getting reviewed. They also have to do a background check, pay for that, plus the fob. We weren't being consistent, I don't think, in that application. So I started asking our attorney here, Tim, and also our outside counsel who handles our reasonable accommodation work. And they were in agreement that it could make sense for us to take that out of that process and create a separate policy so that anyone within the LHA portfolio who is 55 and older can request 1 additional fob without having to go through this reasonable accommodation. All they would have to do is make the request to the community manager, and the community manager would walk them through this policy, have them sign an addendum, and they'd have to identify a person. We would take that information so we have it on file, and no background check, and they would get that fob. But basically reiterating what's already in their lease, which is that you are responsible for your guests' behavior, their actions, damages, that we are not liable as LHA and the property for anything that your guest does or anything that comes of them being on the property. And so that's what this policy sets forth. The eligibility, they have to be 55 and older, residing in an LHA managed property in And we have LHA managed and not owned because now we're managing Zinnia, which is not ours, we don't own it. They get one additional fob. The guest must be an individual who assists or support the resident but does not reside in the property. The resident is fully responsible for the behavior of their guest.
Can we back up a
Sure.
second? So I have a question. I know we're saying the residents that are age 55 and above. Do we have any disabled people that are in our facilities that are under 55
Yes.
that would have this?
So if the reason why we're targeting this population is because it's a need that makes sense. If you have a disability and you need this, you can go through the reasonable accommodation process. It will cut down on the number of requests we get and the time to go through and review and process those requests. So anyone with an LHA who has a disability who needs an additional fob can still go that route. This actually takes out the need for a disability, because what I've seen is there are a lot of seniors who are asking for the fob that don't actually have the documentation to support that they have a disability, and therefore I have to deny their reasonable accommodation. This removes that denial.
Can we remove properties?
Yeah.
I was gonna ask the exact same thing,
I
yeah.
think does this go to, you can use this at Zinnia too if you're over 55?
Yeah.
And I think we'd have to. I mean, if we're basically saying that we're taking it out of, the separate process, but I think we still have to be cognizant of giving everybody that chance at the same time. Like, I was thinking the same thing, that I didn't know if the suites in Zinnia, just from like a policy perspective, it makes as much sense. But I'm not sure if we could axe out, certain properties, because I think that's
No, this
going to be a
is
problem.
portfolio wide.
Right. Yeah.
This doesn't limit it to the senior properties, and in my discussion with Wes, he thought that was a better move because there might be seniors living in a multifamily property that this would not apply to. That they would be exempt from this.
Part of it is when I think of the suites in Zinnia, you can't control who you give it to. And this is what I was thinking about last night when I was going over this is, we know we have a lot of problems with people getting in anyway, and it just makes it more uncontrollable. So
Do you
that,
want to carve out the PSH properties?
at least,
Okay.
because that's our issue right now. I mean, the people that are sneaking in, they can just say, I want an extra fob and give it to them.
So
it would cause more unauthorized residents too.
with this policy though, the person that's getting the fob, it's assigned to them, they sign this policy.
It's just a
I
train
know.
wreck that occurs before you deal with it.
Yeah. I don't know if that will create equity issues
Yeah,
or claims of discrimination.
Yeah, I think that's why. Certainly, I think we should check with Tim if his initial reaction was, "We got to do it LHA, portfolio wide."
It was Wes, yeah.
Oh, that's right. But I can't, identify the exact specific thing that I'm queasy about there legally. But I think that, and I agree. I think it's going to be really problematic, honestly. But I'm not sure if we can just policy wide exclude people who are 55 plus from benefits that we're giving to other residents at other properties. But I don't know the full question. I think maybe we check back with the city council attorneys on that, or the city attorneys on that.
I think unless you just did it to your senior properties, because you can make specific rules, you can't make
Right.
regular,
Yeah.
units for senior housing. You might be able to get away with it that way.
Well, do we have anybody at neighborhood?
So neighborhood doesn't have fobs, so it's a moot point for them, but I'm thinking ahead to Ascent. We could have seniors living at Ascent
Yeah.
who need an extra fob for the same reason that anyone at our senior properties need it. So I don't want to create issues there by excluding them just because they don't live in a senior property. They're still a senior. And the intent is to give them that opportunity for assistance.
Maybe we could just do permanent support. We could exclude permanent supportive housing because the rules are different.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when you move in, you can't have visitors, and maybe
That would
because
be a better argument.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. If you could just exempt the permanent supportive housing, I'm not as concerned about it on the other properties. Time is also a thing. So we're putting the cameras in, which helps with seeing the key in. when they key fob, you could go to the camera and see who's in and see the building. On the city side, we are about to put out a bid for access control with a precursor or pre-requirement that says that it has an automatic interface in with the cameras. So if we do that, then if the housing authority can move access control onto this system, then when somebody key fobs in, the camera can snap an image that says this is who's coming in, makes it easier to deal with it in a faster way, that then can start hitting some pressure relief valves. But I'm just thinking about what we're about to talk about after this meeting, and we just don't see those types of problems in the other properties, and so I get it on the senior properties.
At Ascent, one, so there's 2 ways to enter the buildings, and there's 4 separate contained buildings with a hallway to access the units. On the external street side, so facing Hearthstone and Lodge, where you have like street parking, there will be, the ability to badge in with a fob for residents. And then on the interior side, where the parking lot is an interior U shape, I think we will have these. We're going to do the butterfly index. I don't think we are. We were talking about having this one product called Butterfly MX, which allows you to tap into the door system. They can call the resident. There's a camera, and they can let them in. I think we're actually going to do something a little more rudimentary, where they can call them without the camera piece for cost, because there's an ongoing cost. So having something to take their picture. I don't think there's a camera that looks at the doors specifically, but it does cover that entire exterior of the property. So you will see people moving, and you'll be able to follow them.
Yeah, the scent's going to be different too, because you may have to give somebody 4 key fobs.
Right, there will be way more fobs at that property than there will be at others.
I wish maybe if there's a way that we can do it property specific, and because this rule won't work if you're thinking of the scent, because the scent's going to have its own rules based on the number of people living in the household.
Right, so this would be 1 additional fob over what
you get.
What you get when you move in. So if you are a married couple with 2 kids, and your teenagers are old enough to come and go, and you have 4 fobs, you're not going to apply for this because you're not meeting the age requirement. But if you're a single person living in a 1-bedroom apartment, then
you might can carve out because the rules are different.
Right.
I mean, in terms of what you can do and how you can do it. So you don't want to create a conflict with the rules here.
Right.
Versus, so what I was thinking about last night is they can't have guests after 10, but if you give somebody a key fob, then you're technically not a guest in that sense.
Well, they still have to check in.
Right.
They don't live there, at least at Zinnia. We don't have the check-in rules at the suites like we do at Zinnia.
Right.
Just something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see if we can carve those 2 off.
Okay.
I think if we can carve those 2 off, it'll work. Last night I had a bit of a panic moment just based on what we're going to talk about in an hour or so.
Okay.
So if you card those 2 off, that means if somebody at Suites needed an extra fob,
They would go through the reasonable accommodation, provided that they have a verifiable.
I'm just thinking about some of those people over
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Okay.
So they could still do it. It
They
just
still
seems-
have access.
Right,
They just
they
have to
still
go
have
through
the
the
ability to do it.
Their
It's just
guests
not
would have
this,
to do
yeah.
the background check and those kind of things.
Does that apply to Zinnia?
Yeah.
The reasonable accommodation? Okay. Okay. So if there's a camera and it takes a picture when they do the fob, then you'll know if it's actually that person that's actually using it. You'll be able to
In the
track
future.
that.
In the future.
Yeah.
We've got a bid that we're bidding that out here in the near future. You may want to think about camera placement on doors, just because we ran into this issue here, where we had somebody that got in the building, we couldn't find them, and then realized we didn't have cameras on all the doors.
Yeah,
And had we had cameras on all the doors, we would have realized they left.
There's 16 points of entry hits,
You know.
because there's 8 doors on each side.
How many cameras do we have at Ascent? Do you know off the top of your head?
I have the drawing on my desk.
We may look at the strategically placing the dome cameras with multiple lenses in PTZ.
So those doors are going to be accessible all time, in and out, with a fob?
With a fob. 2, 1 on each side.
Do you have any in the hallways?
No, not in the interior hallways.
Yeah, we're gonna.
And then there's 3 floors,
Yeah.
4 buildings.
It's really your entry points that you're more concerned about.
Do the doors ever lock down after a certain time to where it's just the front that you can get in?
They're always locked. You have to have a fob to get in.
I mean, just the outside door.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
always
always
locked.
locked. They're secure.
Can you do the extra fob only on one door?
Yeah, so could you force entry after a certain hour, like at 10, through one single point?
We
So you're
could.
not having to look at all the doors all the
Mhm.
time?
Yeah.
We could, that would be property specific.
Yeah,
We
that's a
could
good
incorporate
idea.
that in our actual procedures.
That's a good idea.
Because then you could, if we had it on the interior doors where the parking is, there's way more coverage, camera coverage from multiple angles
Mhm.
there, because we have the community building there as well. So there's extra cameras looking out.
Yeah.
And I went through and added more positions to look and cover every corner we can.
We went over part of it.
We still need to finish.
I know.
That actually is a good idea for all of it. If on the extra key fob, you only allow entry into the primary door,
Where we have good
where we
coverage.
know we have coverage.
That's a great idea.
I get
That was
like
your-
that.
Well, kind of my idea, but you finished the idea. You started it, you
Yeah.
finished it, that's a really good idea.
But I think that's actually a really good approach. And then if we could key out or pull out permanent supportive, evaluate how it's working, and if it works, we could theoretically then consider it a PSH if we can see that it's working.
Yeah.
And even the time restriction, I think Arlene said the time restriction too. Although that's problematic because if there's an emergency.
They need to have access. That's the whole point.
What we could do though is, it would be good too, because I'm starting to see the, what are they calling it? Not the caring communities, but CareNet. So that thing that we're doing to,
The Salesforce?
with Salesforce, it would be interesting to see if we could say, in this, we will give you a key fob, but we need you to participate in exchange for the key fob. We need you to participate in this. That way you can log in then who is their emergency contact in these issues. So then we have it in that system. So if something happens, police and fire have access to it.
Yeah. Once that is it live yet?
It started there. I just got a link, and so they're gonna, because we need to get with you all because we want to beta test it.
Yeah, and I know that this has nothing to do with you guys, so sorry. The Yardi tie-in for Kindred, that's going to be complicated because...
Yeah, we think we don't need it right away.
Yeah,
This
that's
is really
gonna be-
about the individual care information.
Okay.
So we think
Yeah, we can incorporate that in
Yeah.
this too.
Yeah.
Because the information, if you go, there's one page that it didn't take it out when I was merging documents, so I apologize. This page is unnecessary. So we revised it to be a policy that gets signed and put enacted by Harold. And then there's an addendum that would go with their lease, which just acknowledges that this is reinforcing what's already in their lease about them being responsible. And then having it as an addendum gives us a chance to reiterate this every year, provided the person still needs the fob. But on the last page, this can change the form of this, the information that we gather about the person that has the fob. And I went back and forth on whether or not we needed this, but since we're not going to do a background check, I want to know who's on the property. You know, we want to know what car are they driving, where do they live, their information, because if somebody makes a claim that they did something, committed some crime, I'd like to be able to give this information to authorities when requested, whether they did it or not, you know.
And does it track the fob number?
Yes, the systems track the fob, so you can log in and see who's accessing, who's using it, what times, when, and then you can cross-reference that with cameras until we have a more integrated system.
Is there any ability to deny an application? So say someone fills this out and says home address, transit homeless don't have that. Can you, is there ability, a mechanism to say, no, we're not gonna give this person a fob?
I would hesitate to say that we would deny somebody just because of that. What if that person that is homeless is their son or daughter, and that still is their main
Sure,
contact?
I'm just wondering, I mean, because you're gonna have them living in there. That's what that is, right?
So
Not that
there's
they couldn't be.
They might be already.
They might be already.
I know.
We've had situations where we suspect people are living in our units without approval, and we do our own research and investigation. We've got the camera systems. We track when they come and when they go. And if we think that there's enough to assume that they're living there, we will do a demand for compliance and kind of put it on the tenant. There's a fine line with fair housing.
Yeah,
so.
I know. So no real mechanism to deny it. If you're just applying it as a.
Unless they apply, like let's say someone lives at a property, a senior property, and they apply for their son or daughter who lives at the suites, and they leave that information off, and we find out, then they falsified information, we absolutely will deny and revoke their access. If we find out anything that puts the property at risk, we will revoke their access. This gives us the right to revoke access for any reason at any time, and they acknowledge that.
Okay.
So that does cover us a little bit, but I would only do that if we had actual evidence as to why we want to do that.
So if you revoked access, could they go through and do it over again and do it right and be okay?
I mean,
Okay, so I didn't put on that my child was at Sweets, and you found out and you said we revoked access for that child. So it's the only child I have. Can I go through and redo the sheet and say, okay, I screwed up the first time here, I'll do it right?
I think at that point it'd be a no. Now, if they went through the reasonable accommodation process, we're a lot more limited on what we can do. Now, if they lied because there's some drug charges and they were manufacturing methamphetamine in one of our other properties and convicted them, then it's no longer reasonable for us to allow that person to have access. So I think there's I don't want to call it a misconception, but there's a thought with reasonable accommodations that it's a very simple and easy approve, deny. It is. I mean, I review these, and at the forefront of my mind is fair housing, getting sued. I, as an individual, can be sued for discrimination. So we don't make these decisions lightly, and that's why we have an attorney. So we utilize both Tim and Wes. And in some cases, even our eviction attorney, I call Christy to say, what are the bounds here? What is legally reasonable? What could we argue? So
I think the goal is to streamline it and create less work, but hopefully you're not creating policy that on the backside makes more work. If you're having to do whatever. Just something to think about.
If we see this isn't working and it's creating more problems for us, then we can pivot.
So under 5, where this is the indemnified thing, is there any way that the guests could come back and sue us if they fell or if they burned themselves with water or something? Okay, so they.
Well, yeah, I mean, anybody can sue anyone. The question is, if we know of a hazard and they fall in the hazard, yes.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, it gets so specific to the
Neglect.
The issues,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, they could. Is there, just because this is front and center for a different reason, did Tim or Wes say whether or not we have any liability if we give a key fob to someone who's a registered sex offender and they commit a crime?
Yeah. I was going to ask the same thing, and just looking at the info that they're being asked to provide for their applicant information.
The approved person that we give the fob to is a registered sex offender.
How would we
wouldn't know?
Right. So my question would be because we're not doing background checks, do we at least want them to put on with the applicant information even something as simple as this person and I are saying, or what we're not a registered sex offender, don't have a violent felony conviction or something, just so that, because if we have like no information about this other person, I just think that's problematic without any sort of background check. And again, they could tell the truth, they could lie, but but as part of this, we're saying you're certifying that the stuff that you're giving us is true. And so it might make it easier for us to come back and be like, all right, you didn't provide this information, though, that this person really can't be at this property for X, Y, and Z reasons.
But we actually don't relegate you to visit our tenants either. So as the devil's advocate to that, I can't deny access to our tenants' kids simply because they have a criminal background. Nobody's checking that anyway.
Right.
These people can still access this property with the resident going and opening the door.
You're totally right, but at the same time, we're kind of sanctioning them being there by giving them a key card. Like, not sanctioning, maybe that's not the right word, but I think it's a little bit different than just having that person open the door to their friends. We're saying, like, we're giving you to this person, we know this person that we're giving this to. We're going to have that information, and then, if we've got their name and number, and there's some real issue with them going forward, I guess that's my concern. But I do see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Access is going to happen no matter what. To Arlene's point, people are going to be coming and going. Open and obvious hazards are going to be a problem for everybody who's visiting, people who are there for meetings. But it seems to me that there might be a slight difference if we're not asking them to at least be like, yeah, this person is not a registered sex offender. Check the box.
I think it's a waste of time to have them check a box if we're not going to follow up and actually verify it. So if the direction from you to make it more comfortable would be to still do a background check, we can do that. It's going to slow the process, and then it really it defeats the purpose of taking it out of the reasonable accommodation, other than that more people would have access because they're not actually disabled.
Who's going to end up paying for the background check?
So they would have to pay for it themselves. Either the resident would pay for it, or they would get the money
What's
from the
the
person.
cost? 35?
I think it's like 40 with the criminal for the county court additional piece.
I always thought it was
For the combined national and then local, I think it's like $49.
I always, when I make decisions, sometimes when I'm on properties, I think, what would the news headline look like if I did this? Like, if a reporter, and I think about this in terms of, the hotels that they're having in Denver, they have that staff that raped the resident or whatever, and we did a background check, and he had, extensive criminal history. I'm like, what would the news headline look like if we gave a fob to a registered sex offender who then raped a resident or a child? Like, that would be, it would look really bad.
And if we knew their name and date of birth,
and the news, I just see Kyle Clark being like, "Whoa, look at what
and he's already a fan."
So Laura,
he's not a fan. Yeah. So I sometimes I just frame it that way in my head, like, what would this look like on the evening news?
So the positive of adding a background check would just be that additional layer of security and the ability to deny, which I'm in favor of. It would slow down the process, but it also would open up access to our senior residents who don't actually have or don't have support for a disability diagnosis to be able to utilize this, because currently they can't get it through the reasonable accommodation.
You all are. So there was a case. I think this case is still relevant. That I had to brief in graduate school, but talking to attorneys, it's still there. Where if you could have reasonably known that somebody had this propensity and you don't, you're liable. So it's a trucking company that the truck driver was raping individuals, and I think it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, if you can reasonably have known that this person had this record, and they could have by doing a background check, you're liable for it. And that's kind of where I was listening to you all going. It's one thing if a resident lets them in because the resident's taking responsibility. It's another thing if we grant them access, because then we're inherently taking responsibility. And that's where then, could we have reasonably known that the person had the likelihood of doing this? And the answer is yes. because we could have just chosen to implement a background check, and then that's where the liability starts sprinting after us.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, I mean, if they wanted $49 for a background check, and Zach was telling me this thing coming with the state law with the massage parlors and stuff, is they can actually go to like Kinko's or something. He did this in Georgia. There's places where you can go and you can leave fingerprints, and it sends a code to the police department to then get it. So it's like, I don't even think we would have to do it potentially. They could go do it somewhere else, and then it sends a code to the right people, and then they can look at it. But you need to talk to Zach about that. He was the one telling me.
So it sounds like the direction is you'd want to keep a background check for liability sakes.
Okay. Even though it's a big pain.
I mean, I think it's good because it still gives access to some of our residents who otherwise wouldn't be able to do this.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the other thing, and this is, so many times when the door is open and somebody's walking in or coming out, if somebody's out there just waiting, they'll just go back.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I have done that.
I know.
Me too.
But right now, you've got a home that is fairly close to Spring Creek and Fall River. Yeah. Which is,
So we'll go back and revise.
That's what was fresh on my mind.
We'll revise the policy to carve out the permanent supportive housing. We'll verify that won't cause any fair housing issues, especially given the nature of that program and all the rules associated with it. I think that makes sense. Internally, we will add a piece that they agree to use one point of entry that we designate that they would have access to, and we'll add back in the requirement of a background check.
and if they know that point of entry,
Yeah.
even if they have to come in the middle of the night, they know that point of entry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
It's likely going to be the main door, and then it was sent.
Yeah.
It would be whatever site we designate. So we would make sure that they're aware of that. Give them a map. Because we're going to give them the house rules and the lease as well,
Yeah.
so that they understand what the requirements are. They can't say they didn't know.
Yeah, show me again what page it was that you said you didn't need, because I was
This one here.
asleep at that one.
It's just a repeat of.
Yeah. It's
Oh, this
a,
one here.
yeah, this one between the signature page and then the information sheet for the person's information. That one, somehow it didn't get deleted when I combined two policies. Some of LHA's forms are actually Excel spreadsheets. Which is weird. This is an Excel spreadsheet. So I just went with what I had.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Arlene, before we move on, do you mind if we introduce
Yeah.
our
I was gonna
guest?
get to that. Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, well, my name is Christian Ortega, and I am a new family self-sufficiency coordinator at Stonehenge Apartments. So I am joining the meeting to kind of get in, and I am HUD funded.
And this is part of a requirement to
Yes,
attend meetings
it's
like
like a
this, right?
PCC committee, so
So
they
she's-
require for us to come in here. And I'm the only one there, so you guys will probably be seeing me once a month in these meetings.
Oh, good. Hey, welcome. Where is Stonehenge?
Off of Martin.
600 Martin.
Yes.
600 Martin, okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Lauren, while thinking about this, we could theoretically, I'm perusing this CareNet. If we want to tie it together, we could potentially, we need to get Becky, actually do the key fob stuff out of this. And then that way it puts them in the system, just globally for us.
Yep.
But let's talk about that.
Okay.
So this CareNet, just so you all know, is a system we've been building that, starting off, Children, Youth and Family Services, Senior Services, our clinicians that are working on our properties. It's basically a system where they are going to have their records. So then if for some reason somebody Eric encounters in our office, we can type a name in, and it'll tell us who to talk to that is potentially the caseworker that they're working with. And so what it's doing is it's going to circumvent a lot of the physical chasing we have to do when these issues come up, and allow us to directly connect to the caseworker and engage them in the process. Part of what we're thinking about is in the design of this, it can also allow people to, we're talking about an opt-in where they can tell us who their emergency contact is, and we can put all of this information in, and eventually when police will have access, so if fire, if they get a call for service, they can type this information in and immediately get emergency contacts, all the stuff we're talking about. It'll allow us to more quickly deal with whatever situation. And so this is, we want to beta test it with some of our properties so that when folks say we want a welfare check, right now, unless we have specific permission, we can't. They could say, we authorize welfare checks. So then it's a really, boom, we're in, we do a welfare check, versus having to chase down files and all this information. So we've been working on it for a few years. This didn't exist, and we were trying to develop it locally. And in the time they were working on it, Salesforce came in and has built this module. Eventually, we're going to migrate all of our case management to this. The last one would be our lead and core group. And then it just lets everybody interface. We can chat with each other. We can do all sorts of things. So that's what I'm talking about. And then eventually, once we have a good handle on it, we'll probably work with our multifamily housing group to start maybe porting out into other groups so we can just have that information. And then property managers, if they're working with someone in their area, could potentially type in the name and go, oh, they're working with Brandy Queen at the senior center, and can just, and that may be all you see, contact Brandy Queen. And at least it gets the conversation going ahead of time, versus you see a lot of times we're missing pieces just because we don't know.
Okay. Sounds good. Have we beat that thing to death?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course it's dead.
All right. Unfunding challenges update.
So we had talked about having this as maybe a standing item for some time, just to see if there was a lot of change from time to time. I'll say that we haven't had a lot of change since last time we talked about this in terms of what we're seeing at the federal level, unless Harold's been reading recent articles that might change that. But we did meet with our HUD rep on the voucher side here last week, and it was a super helpful meeting, which is a very rare thing to say.
That's great.
So just walking through our 2-year tool, helping us understand what levers we could play with to try and see what the impact would be. It would really help inform if we are looking at a shortfall situation, what levers should we start to pull. Overall, our shortfall, we are projected to be in shortfall. It's about 1 month worth of our HAP contract, which she's saying that across all of the Front Range communities she works with, generally most are in the 1 to 2 month bucket. So we're right in there, not even at the worst side of it, of what she's seeing on average. And we talked about a couple of those, like what could those levers be and what would that do, and kind of just picked her brain. And then we meet tomorrow with a different person at HUD to kind of really dig in. Okay, so we played with the modeling. Now let's look at what this funding picture really looks like. So I'd say for right now, that's the biggest update, is we're working with HUD and actually, making progress with them, just making sure that we can get all of our ducks in a row as we get ready for this. So I think that's the biggest update for now. Harold or Lauren, do you want to add anything, or?
No, I mean, what's coming down is we're starting to see what we thought was going to happen. And there was an article, I think, in the Colorado Sun about, it has nothing to do with housing, but it's about, there's $3.2 billion in federal funds for Colorado's electric co-ops. and it says there may be a catch, and so the catch is they're unfreezing the funds, but asking applicants to adjust their proposals before they're there, and essentially, when they said they've been released, they go, applicants who wish to remove harmful DEIA and far left climate features from project proposals have 30 days to propose project revisions to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So we're seeing it now, where they're probably going to release the funds, but they're making you go in and revise your proposals based on language that is counter to the executive orders. So we're just going to have to watch that.
The most obvious HUD program that is affecting is the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, which we did not partake in, but locally there are partners that have, like Broomfield is now in a real pinch. So that is the first target of that type of messaging.
So I think, the way we approach, I think was okay. But it's really, I think those agencies that have really overt pieces are the ones that are going to have to restructure in order to get the federal funds. So we're starting to see it in other areas. So for example, and when, kind of what we're talking about when we think about things like green energy, you just reframe it in terms of managing costs and things like that. Language is going to be really important. So that's just the latest information I've received.
Did you find the children thing, Chapter?
Yeah, so my computer died, I gotta go grab a cord, but Katie told me that we meet with Wild Plum tomorrow to start nailing down exactly what the plan is, but so far the 3 classrooms were for, one is for 0 to 18 months, one is for 18 months through 2 years, and then the upstairs classroom, which makes sense, no cribs, 3 to 5 year olds. So then the number of kids per class is based on the teacher ratios, and there's a square footage element too, which is why it gets really complicated. So that is what we're nailing down with Wild Plum. So I don't have a full answer for that yet.
Okay, so then the highest we go is 5-year-old.
Yeah.
There's only 2 applicants right now.
For 3 to 5, or total.
Total for the board, and they're going to put in another ad out Sunday and next Wednesday.
Oh, you're talking for the board.
For the board, sorry.
Erica, do you mind looking at the board and commission's website? Just make sure it has that link to the LHA page. I recall that was there when we got started, but I'm not worried if it wasn't.
I didn't see it. It wasn't super intuitive.
All right.
And
Or maybe I just
because
completely missed
we
it.
switched over to the city's website, switched over in November. So all of the links might have,
Yeah, I didn't see any way to.
because there used to
actually
be a
apply
link
for it,
that
like it
sent you
didn't-
directly to LHA.
I don't think it does.
Okay, I'll check.
So that might be why you're not getting any people. It's just too hard.
It would be nice to just have it in one place.
Yeah.
Or at least 2. Could be asked
At least 2,
to
yeah. Okay, resident quality of life.
This is nothing from staff side. This is the standing agenda item if the board members want to bring anything forward.
Well, this is the first month that we actually are going on the quarterly meetings at the Coffee and Conversations. And so far, I think it's just been Aspen Meadows, so far.
No, we've had the quarterly one. It started in January.
And then it jumped to April. Yeah.
Oh, you mean the first one of this month? I believe that's right. Yes.
And so
we
from
have
January
Hearthstone
to
today.
April, I was kind of surprised that it was really a pretty short meeting. 3. Yeah. So I think that has been a good change.
I think communication with our staff, providing communication to residents, being more consistent, has also helped improve because they're actually getting answers when they ask questions, and our staff are aware of the answers. They're not just saying I don't know or I'm not sure and forgetting to respond. So I think it's twofold, which is a good thing.
So in regard to that, I know at one point as council members, we were given code to get into the units, but I'm not sure that works anymore. And
To
did
get
you
in the
guys
doors?
decide not to give us that?
The codes.
It changed because it was
Because of me.
because of Sarah. Oh, she said it in a meeting.
My fault.
But if you need a code, we will send you codes. The only property,
You send it to me too.
yes,
Thank you.
the only property that didn't get updated is AMSA because their entry call box system is older. It's not as new as the other properties, and we're actually waiting on them to send us a quote for updating that system because there's things we cannot do with it because it's old. Even though I think it was upgraded in 2020.
I thought it was upgraded in 2020.
We
could double
Summer
check that.
can't access a lot of things like to update the entry codes, and so he came out. I was there when we were preparing for the flooring, and he was there fixing something, and he was like, "I can't even get into this because it's the back end is old."
I'm not 100% positive. But I'm quite sure we worked on it.
Yeah.
So
Parts might have gotten upgraded, but I don't know that the guts of the system did. So we're waiting to get a quote for that, and we might be replacing that.
So in order
Piece of
to
equipment.
use the code, we have to have the keypad, right? And I don't think every place has a keypad.
I actually think it's the back end of the system. It's not the actual box itself. It's the program behind it that's not working.
Right, but for us, if we wanted to attend a coffee conversation,
There's a keypad there.
at Suites, there's a keypad?
Oh, at Suites, no. At Suites, there is not. It's fob only.
Okay. And there's usually somebody
call
there to
button.
open that.
Right?
I don't know if I don't think the call button goes to the office. It might be something worth considering, changing that, because I have a fob and it doesn't work. So half the time I have to wait for someone to let me in, but thankfully residents recognize me and will let me in.
sounds like we have a larger problem. No, I mean that we should be figuring out which, if the Suites one doesn't go to the office and Summer can't access the key codes, looks like we need to just look at our systems and.
Because they're not universal.
I thought you were going to bring something new in.
No.
We have a big problem now, guys. Buckle up.
We will email you a code. Please don't share it.
Okay.
So, Arlene, I had one thing or do you feel we discussed that sufficiently, or?
Yeah, beat it to death.
Okay. For the resident quality of life. So I was just blown away. I think it was January that we had the Ride Longmont presentation to this board. I got really excited about it. I've shared this information with like a ton of people. I just think it's a really cool program. And I just wanted to generally ask if any of you guys have heard from any of the residents if they're using it and if they've got information about it, or if there's just any updates about how that's affected the residents at our properties.
I've seen them zooming around.
Yeah, me too. Probably half of them are referred by me. I'm always like, but yeah, has anybody heard any feedback? And I'm planning to go, this week and ask residents some of that too.
My son used it, and he's like, "You're making me walk down the road."
Right.
I'm like, "Oh, okay. You can walk down the road. It'll be all right."
That's such a
But
good thing to say.
he said it worked fine. Besides that, it was great.
I had to book a ride for a resident at BOM when the elevator went down.
Okay.
She didn't have transportation, and I was working from home,
Yeah.
and so I actually paid for that with my LHA P card, but created the account and booked it for her,
That's
and
great.
it was weird because technically they're looking for me,
Oh, right. Yeah.
and you get the phone number just like you would with Lyft, and you
Mhm.
can call the driver, and I explained what was going on, and Quincy stayed with her too to make sure
That's great.
that she got on there okay. but it worked. I've heard mixed reviews from people. I've heard seniors say it won't work for me because I can't walk down the road
Yeah.
to where they want to pick me up. But I think if you're utilizing the ADA piece, I think it's more door to door.
Yeah, seems like that could be information that could be conveyed.
I don't know that it would replace the via grocery shopping,
Oh, no.
No.
but we have the flyers at all of our properties. We
Right.
do tell people about it.
Right.
I've sung its praises. I haven't ridden it myself. I haven't had to yet, but there will come a time when I get stranded somewhere and I'll
Oh,
need it.
yeah.
I did,
Yeah.
and it was my neighbor who picked us up. I was like, hey, our kids went to preschool together.
Yeah, they've, a month or so ago, I think it's about a month ago, they've exceeded 10,000 rides.
So it sounds well organized.
Yeah, it's
First-
outperforming Sacramento. Sacramento started at the same time.
Good.
Mm.
We might want to see if we can get one of Phil's staff members to come in one of our quarterlies, because they can talk about Ride Longmont, but then if you do have a disability, he can tell them how to go into the RTD system, because RTD does have that right now it's free component to go to the door. And
But don't you have to go down to Denver?
I don't think so. So Phil's worked, that's what I'm saying. We might want to get with
Yeah.
Phil and have them, or whoever it is now that he hired, to come in and talk about it, because you have call and ride, and then you have the paratransit. And the paratransit is free because the bus service is free, and that's a federal requirement. So it's a little bit different for us because we do the fare bike on the buses. So when we did that paratransit has to be free as well. And so I think that may just be somebody to bring in.
Did my mom do coffee conversations? I thought we did. Okay.
I think we've talked about it, but I don't know if they've come and done a demonstration,
like
but
a
I think
great
that'd be a good idea. I know when I moved my dad into one of BCH's properties, they talked about that service, but she said you actually have to go down to Denver to get approved, but that could be, Longmont's different. If the bus service is free, maybe
Yes.
that makes it easier.
Yeah,
So I'll talk to Phil.
yeah. Talk to or just Cammy or who I forget who it is.
I
but
know
they-
Candy.
One of them can come in
I know
and do
Candy.
it.
So I've heard mixed things on it too, and mostly it's like if they have to walk a block or something like that, it's inconvenient for them. The price definitely is good, but if somebody comes to talk at Coffee and Conversations, it would be nice if they could walk them through how, if you are handicapped or if you need that
Mhm.
special, you need to put on their senior, and maybe they will pick you up closer to the door.
I think they have to. If you use a
If you
walker
need those.
or you're in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
if you have mobility issues.
But the other one doesn't. And it will not work for grocery shopping. If you had one bag, I could see it would work.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
They're not going to get out and assist
Mhm.
is the difference. But I think the via transportation is easier because there's more people to help. And the camaraderie is nice.
Mhm. Yeah, some of them just like to go out.
Maybe we'll do that at the summer session.
All right. Anything else under resident comments? Okay, LHA report.
All right, occupancy is kind of the same. Quincy has taken over filling units, and he is, we have a lot of our staff focused on getting the Yardy Rent Cafe happening. And so they've been spending a lot of time doing demos, running through trainings. So Quincy has taken sort of responsibility for calling to fill units. We did move our wait list into Yardy for all properties, which was a huge next step. And so he's been filling units. We are seeing it happen faster, which is great. We also have a new staff member who started this week, so he's sort of torn between onboarding and doing this.
The property manager.
She's an assistant community manager for Suites in Zinnia. So we still have roughly the same number of vacants that we've had. Obviously, Aspen Meadows Senior, we're keeping the 4 open because of all of the construction work. They are utilizing those vacant units for staging, and then also replacing the flooring. And then once that flooring is done and we accept those units, we'll work to get those filled. We are actually calling people before units are fully done so that we can get someone in the pipeline, which is much faster than waiting until it's done to call. Trying to think what else.
What's turnaround time, pretty much, Lauren?
It's still not ideal. It's still a couple weeks. That's something we're going to start working on and dialing in on this year, is to improve that turnaround time. I am also working to get the RFP out for the unit turns so that we can have that assistance. Because even when we're fully staffed, we're still not seeing that time get better. And then when you have a lot of vacancies at one property at one time, that puts a strain on the staff. So we still want to utilize that funding. We also have a lot of people giving notice to move out. We're seeing some seniors leave.
Do we know why most of the time or not?
I would say the majority of the time is to go to assisted living or to go live with family because they cannot independently live on their own. We just had one person leave VOM for that reason. He had just come back from the elevator situation, and then I think his family decided it was time. So a lot of people going into assisted living. Still, given the population, we do have a lot of deaths. But we officially promoted Nikki, one of our assistant community managers, to community manager, and she's now overseeing the Hearthstone and Lodge.
On your org chart, updated.
And we hired Catherine this week. She is an assistant community manager at Sweet Zinnia. We are currently still looking for one more assistant community manager to now replace Nikki at Fall River Spring Creek, and then we're looking for a community manager for the Sweets and Zinnia. So we do plan to shift and move around some staff, mostly just because of the nature and workload of those two properties being the largest number of units and just the most intense. We want to give the current community manager a break. So we're going to relocate her to VOM and then hire for Sweets and Zinnia.
So,
She's still there currently.
Jonah, is that what
Yes.
Jonah? Okay.
So Quincy's kind of been between Quincy and Jackie, the assistant. They've kind of been holding down the fort at VOM. And then, we want to hire for the right fit, because it doesn't matter how many property management skills you have. If you can't hack PSH, then you won't succeed. So we're looking very carefully for the right person to take on those units. John has done an amazing job of, having great resident relations and a great relationship with the service providers. Our clinical team at the Suites, Clinica's voucher staff at the Suites, also Clinica at Zinnia, and All Roads at Zinnia. But we just want to make sure that we're not burning out people. So
She's very patient.
she is very patient. Yeah, she is very patient. The Suites 7228 should be done. I believe they were just going to be placing the appliances last week. And so we're working with MHP to get a tenant for that unit and get that one filled. And then we will be done with meth units. And then we have our affordable unit vacancy.
This isn't wood, real wood.
Oh, good. Yeah. Awesome. No jinxing. Our vacancy loss report, I want to get with Kendra. I've been playing around with the reports that we can use, but she's really laser focused on both. We had 3 audits these last 2 weeks.
Wow.
And one on site today, and then also getting the Yardy stuff ready to roll for Red Cafe. So we haven't dialed down a better report yet for vacancies, but it is still in the works once we have that better.
And was that
report.
scheduled to be the audits all in at one time?
We do, for the financial side, yes, those happens all in this time of year. But then, like,
Oh,
property audits from other funders or agencies, those could be peppered all over. And we have certainly gotten unlucky with having many of those at the same time in the past, but that's not this one.
Yeah,
I think we had more months with some type of audit than we did without an audit.
yeah, which tracks with COVID being over.
Yeah.
Since they weren't coming and doing audits in person. But our audits have gone really well, both with Jaffa and DOH. And then with the investors and the banks, we didn't have any issues. And then for property updates,
So, just a question on at least the senior units. Are we finding that the people are over, budget's not the right word, but overqualified, I guess that's what it is?
over income.
Yeah, over income. Is that pretty much the main reason?
I think it's more relatable for 2 bedrooms. If it's a 50 or 60% unit, unless it's a 2-income household, it's hard for a single person to cover that rent. We've also had families over income at Aspen Meadows neighborhood too. Yeah, there's not much. We can be more flexible when people just don't make quite enough for the 2 times the rent piece. We have the flexibility with that, but when they're over income, there's not. So for property updates, let's see, Hardstone and Lodge, just the general maintenance things that we're working on, keeping them updated on construction. I haven't received any complaints about construction noise. There was one night last year when they were doing earthwork that they ran into an issue and had to work all night long. They were gracious about it, but no complaints. Briarwood, we replaced the boiler there because it had leaked and flooded the office. And so we went ahead and replaced some of the mechanical components of that building.
Where the bedrooms is? Okay.
Luckily, nothing was like damaged to the place to the point that we had to replace anything because it was a concrete floor with carpet, and most of their stuff was up off the ground anyway. So that all happened around the same time as the elevator going out at Village on Main, nothing major happening. We are going to have a tour of VOM on April 24th. I did email you an invitation to that if you would like to come. It is being hosted by the Women's Affordable Housing Network of Colorado. I used to be a board member there, and one of our HCI staff are on the board now. And so we have a double feature between the Spoke on Kaufman and VOM. We're going to tour a new LIHTC project and a rehab, and BCHA will give the tour over there, and then Katie and I will work on the one at Village on Main, and then we're going to head over to Brooks on Main for happy hour. So anyone is welcome to attend. I think there is a suggested cost, and you don't have to be a woman to come support the Affordable Housing Network.
I said that was a good.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
So that's happening at VOM. Then AMSA flooring replacement. That is a lot to handle. Fall River and Spring Creek, just doing some much needed landscaping improvements as we go along. Getting ready to rehire the landscaping company who will do the sprinklers and all the landscaping for the season. At the suites, we have the elevator. We have 2 elevators there. One that has been consistently down or unreliable and no one uses because you get trapped in it. And so we had signed a contract at the end of last year to do a full replacement of that elevator, and it has just taken a long time to get that in their schedule. So Quincy's been staying on top of them along with maintenance. So we'll hopefully have more information on that project. What else? I also am working on the RFP with purchasing for the doors replacement at the suites, which will be huge. In case you don't remember, we got $200,000 from the CDBG funds from the city to do that door replacement, because there's very large gaps at the bottom. Lets light, sound in, does not contribute to the trauma-informed design. And also people get locked out because their hotel doors they automatically lock once you leave the unit. And that creates financial strain both on the tenants and LHA as far as operations. We are also getting the cameras installed for the camera project at the suites. That's been ongoing. They're not quite done yet.
They should be done tomorrow.
Okay, so they'll be done tomorrow, and we'll have that up and running.
Are they doing they're doing exterior too, right? They're doing all
They're replacing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And next in line, I believe, is Spring Creek. And then at Spring Creek and Fall River, we are still waiting on, I think, at Spring Creek for Nextlight to finish the Wi-Fi project that will give better cell phone access in those properties. I think we were able to complete Fall River. I don't think we've done any training yet on accessing that, so we need to work on that. And then for Spring Creek, they're going to add, I believe they only need to have one.
Yes.
One repeater.
One repeater.
So they don't have to do it floor by floor, which is great because we're paying for the equipment discount, but we're still paying for it. So that's less equipment to pay for. Zinnia, not much happening there. Is there anything I missed? Aspen Meadows neighborhood. I think Patrick's been working on some stuff related to the fire suppression system at that property, but nothing major happening there. That's kind of it on the properties.
So this is kind of an off-the-wall question. Do we have smart meters installed on our buildings?
Yes, but
Is it a master meter?
some are master meters. I think all of them may be master meters.
BOM's not, right?
AMN is not.
Yeah, AMN's
They're per
not.
unit.
Right. AMSA is. VOM now is. Hearthstone and Lodge, we pay, those utilities are covered in rent. Yeah, it might just be AMN that's not master meter
AMN's
now.
all, yeah, because of
They
the
pay their own
individual.
utilities.
They pay their own utilities.
And then I think at the cent
Master meters.
will be a
yeah.
master meter for the buildings.
Yes. 'Cause
So
of the
then
solar.
AMN will have individual smart meters
Mhm.
per unit. So are you getting any negative feedback on that?
Not from any of our residents.
Okay. I just had to notice that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's,
It
when
just
we
comes
look
up
at
all the
it
time.
globally, I would probably say less than 2%, but it's a thing that you hear in council a lot. But it's really important as they're moving on the electric side to 100% renewable energy. You know, those meters are going to be incredibly important for how we manage the grid, but how people manage it, because, you know, in about 5 years, we'll probably be sending signals to say, like, if you need to do anything with electricity, do it now because it could be free. Or if you're going to do it, you may not want to do it here because it's more expensive. Because in that, it'll balance it out where it's going to be a little bit contrary. If you think it's going to be a little bit contrary to what people normally think of use your electricity at night, in reality, where there's going to be a lot of renewables on the grid is going to be during the day. And so those meters are really important as we're managing the system for a broad objective. So most of those are in. I can tell you who's got a problem with it.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we do have an opt-out provision. It does cost more simply because the opt-out will require someone to come and read the meter, whereas the AMI doesn't. So it does cost more to opt out. But I haven't heard anything from them about this.
Is the set going to be totally electric?
Yes.
Yes.
100%.
And part of it with multifamily, why you want a master meter is if you're covering all the bills, it makes no sense to have and pay for multiple meters.
Right.
anytime you bring in this solar component, it's hard to do it without utilizing a master meter. And so if you're a private apartment owner, if you're going to do solar panels on your rooftop, they've designed a process to do a master meter, but then you have to individually meter it so you can bill your residents. My kids have, well, no, they don't. They have a meter, but it's just because solar doesn't work well when you have the individual meters. So that's a different process.
At Ascent, there'll be the master meter that handles the solar, but then there's sub-meters so the master meter will figure out, the offset, and then the remainder gets billed to the residents directly based off their sub-meter data.
Which I believe we can monitor as part of the enterprise green communities. So if someone's using a lot of electricity and a lot of water, you might investigate why. You do some tenant education.
Yeah, in a sense, really setting the model for LPC in terms of how we just approach this conversation in general for market rate as well.
That's always how I know I have off-lease tenants. It's when you're just like, that water bill. How many people are living in that two-bedroom unit? 11? You can totally tell by usage. You really can.
In the old days, I could tell when they'd be growing certain things.
We're allowed to.
Right, I know.
That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, no, it's not. Now, once it was legalized, now they can't compete.
Yeah.
Or you could look at the rooftops and tell.
Yeah.
Because the snow would stick.
Yep.
That's true.
You can count the plants, though. Yes, if you wanted to get to the weeds. Well, that wasn't meant to be.
So water is not turned on in your properties yet, right? Outside landscape plan?
Yeah, I think we're still too early.
Yeah, probably not till May.
But we have a plan. I think there was confusion last year because the company that did our backflow inspections did the inspections and did not tag the meters. So when EDI went to do it, they ran into issues. So we have a better plan for this.
Well, there were a lot of issues related to a state law that said you had to be a licensed plumber.
Yes, that's true.
And so a lot of companies that were doing the inspection, and I think they changed it because I know he supported it, or it's in the process of being changed.
Did that change? Because I know last year we had to actually hire a plumber, which was super annoying.
There's
I feel
legislation now.
Is it going to change?
Hopefully.
That would be great. I didn't know that. It was expensive and annoying.
Right.
Yeah. So I think because I think our council took a position to support the legislation recently, so it's in the session now.
Okay.
And I don't think we're hearing that anybody's opposing it. It's just one of those unintended. Many of the unintended consequences come out of legislation.
Yeah. I mean, it was perfectly fine before, to have tradespeople do it. There's no reason to have a licensed plumber check your phone.
Installing, different story.
Sure, but your yearly checks don't need to be.
Okay, Sarah.
You had the camera update. Any questions on that? I guess I can give some backstory on the why Spring Creek's next. So they basically sent cameras. We, thanks to Harold, put let's send these cameras for the suites now, and they were provisioned along with the Spring Creek cameras for some reason. So those ones were sent and they're here. So that's kind of the backstory on that, why we're going to Spring Creek first. The other properties, minus Briarwood and AMSA, should be arriving soon. And then the other two properties are in provisioning now.
We just wrapped up. We got all of the funding agreements done and vendor contracts done here, a week ago or so. So we've got every camera system at every property plus 5 years of licensing covered by either CDBG or primarily ARPA funds, which thank you, City, for that, because we got every single property covered in.
Yes, so that's good.
So at neighborhood, is it a camera on each unit? No, it's just around the property.
I think we have 4 cameras there. And it's really, we don't need that many there, to be honest with you, because some of the cameras at AMSA pick up some of the parking lots for the neighborhood. So we have good coverage. So meth detectors for Ascent are in the United States. There are some custom delays, so I'm waiting for those to be delivered. They're in LA. So we need to, I'm going to work with Lauren on tracking how we're going to track all of these and what we're going to do. Right now I have a few in the city that are pretty problematic to track. So we're working with Doug Spite and Derek on that end for the city side, but on the LHA side we need to.
We'll have a SOP, which as we began drafting it, snowballed.
Yeah.
Because as we started answering one question, more questions would pop up. So we'll be working with the legal team on that.
Yes, and then calls for service. The suites only had 4. AMN only had 3. AMSA had 4, but those were all core calls. Fall River had 1. Spring Creek 2. Hearthstone had 1 welfare check. Lodge had 1 medical. Briarwood had 0. And BOM just had a welfare check. And Zinnia had 15.
That's been kind of pretty consistent. Do you anticipate that remaining consistent, or
Yes.
it's not going to go down?
Is it mostly welfare checks or medical or just
At Zinnia? Oh no.
It's all crime
We
related.
had some pretty significant criminal activity there.
Have we had evictions over there?
Mhm.
Based on criminal history? Or based
Based
on
on
behavioral
Behavior.
evictions? How are those going? How are the behavioral evictions going? Are they going pretty smoothly? Are they?
We've been fortunate that some of the behavioral issues, they also don't pay their rent. So
Yeah, that's the easier path.
we usually have them on a rent demand. We have the ability to do a hybrid, rent and compliance. So if we think that's better, we'll use a hybrid demand. That way, if the rent gets paid, we can still continue. Thankfully, if it was behavioral, they were egregious enough that it was a 3 or 10 day. So it hasn't been that difficult to get out if we needed them to for safety's sake. Safety and health.
Are you having any pushback from mental health partners when you do event people? They're
Not
going
for
to
the
be
ones that we've had. They're egregious enough. I don't know if we have mentioned it to this group yet, but the between Element, Clinica, which is mental health partners, All Roads and us, we worked and got DOH to approve a pause on accepting one home applicants, meaning that's the statewide list versus the local coordinated entry list for those exiting homelessness. So we have a pause on that because just similar to the suites 1 year ago, we showed DOH, what are some of the signs of indicators of success? A connection to the local community is really major. And so we can show that behavioral issues, criminal issues, there is a correlation. And so people coming up from the statewide list, they could be coming from anywhere. They don't have a local connection, and often they come with higher acuity of need and are just not ready for housing. Or at least permanent supportive housing, independent living with even supports on site. So we have a pause on that for now. For new tenants, they'll all be coming from the local list for the time being.
So maybe our calls for service will
Maybe.
But in time, suites became more stable. So we're hoping that happens at Zinnia as well.
So with your evictions, are the people that are there beginning to get the message that we need to behave or we're going to be evicted, or do you think?
Sure that's
No.
what it is.
Feels like if you felt that way, you felt it from the beginning versus not.
I think that people who realize how valuable it is to have a home, but not just have a home, but have a voucher associated with it, and that support they are trying to walk the line. That doesn't mean they don't screw up. And we don't kick people out at the first sign of the problem. You know, we're talking major criminal activity, assault, rape, drugs. Those are the things that we will move on fast. If it's just behavioral, people screaming, not following rules, it's gonna take a while. We're gonna work with all roads. We're gonna work with the clinic team, because that is the point of permanent supportive housing. It's not easy, but that's what we're there for. So I would say the majority of the people who live there are very happy to be there and understand, you know, what the opportunity that they have.
Yeah, I think it's about protecting those that are really trying and not letting them be derailed by the really egregious behaviors that we're seeing from certain individuals, and digging in and dealing with it very quickly. We got a meeting on that after this, but I think that's what in some of these programs gets lost in the conversation, because it's about, well, we need to house everyone. Okay, but if you have 75% of the people that are really trying, and you have 25% that are creating utter chaos and destabilizing the 75%, at what point does the tail start wagging the dog in this situation? And I think that's where they've been successful with the state, first with the suites, and now to show the data. We go, you're destabilizing everyone for one or two or three individuals. And that's where we just have to be very clear-eyed as we're continuing to do this. And make hard decisions. But it's a decision based on the community, not on the individual.
Yeah, I've been watching, like, kind of just from the side what's been happening at Blue Sky, you know, Boulder.
Mm-hmm.
It's, once you start that ball down that hill, it's hard to push it back up.
Yep.
So they're really, it sounds like they're really struggling there.
I think so. What do you say?
Yeah.
And frankly, I think the difference is we're managing here.
Yeah. That's all the difference.
And holding a harder line to say, look, and even to the point where at one point in the meeting, I'm like, if that's the way you want to do it, maybe we're not the right ones to do it. And I think that shifted the conversation.
And the security company that we're using now versus the one that is in Boulder that initially was with us, I think that's night and day.
Yep. And I mean, we can push back on it, you know, like we're dealing with an issue right now where we allow them to have pepper spray, and people aren't thrilled that we allow them to have pepper spray.
It's not pepper spray.
Or whatever it is.
They're pepper pellets that look like a gun.
Yeah.
And the service providers are concerned because it isn't trauma informed. And this is, we spent an entire year working on expectation and relationship building with these service providers, because there is going to come a time where, from an operations standpoint and a service provider standpoint, we're not going to agree. Our role as the property manager is to protect the asset and to reduce liability, whereas service providers want to keep people housed. Both are reasonable expectations, noble, good goals. In this case, it is the decision of the property owner to hire a security company, LHA owning the suites, Element owning Zinnia. And while the service providers, and I think we could agree that it is not trauma-informed to have someone carrying around what looks like a gun, but for the people that are traumatized by seeing a gun on a security person, there's also probably someone there who feels safer. Our staff feels safer.
Yep.
I mean, we're trying to hire for someone to go to that property. We've had 2 people that were ideal that we wanted to move forward with that have already emailed after the interview and said, after thinking about this more, I am not comfortable being in that situation. Because we have RSOs, because we have people who are criminals, because there's drugs. And a lot of times, it's a female-dominated industry. There aren't a lot of male property managers.
Yeah.
So,
Or clinicians or anything like that. It's all women.
yeah, as a female, I can't say I blame them. So it is important for us not only to protect our staff and the clinical staff and the all-road staff, but they also protect from other residents. They protect the other residents as well.
And it is our responsibility to make sure a security company that we hire goes through proper training and protocols and knows what and how to use a pellet.
Well, it's broader than just the properties. So when you look generally at areas and things that we're seeing in the area itself, some of the more significant issues aren't necessarily driven by the people who live in the property. It may be driven by people who are around the property that choose to go to the property. And so it's a much more complicated conversation. But Lauren talked to me, I'm like, hold the line on this, because the safety of our staff, the safety of the residents, the safety of the security guards is of paramount concern to us. And so we're holding the line on it. And I think those are the differences in that. And I think it's a relationship that we have with public safety. And I mean, between our security company and reports, we know what's going on all of our properties. And they escalate it, and 90% of them, 98% probably, they work it out amongst themselves. The 2% that gets really bad, it escalates pretty fast. Because if you don't do that, you will lose control of that property, and you will not protect the residents. And I can live with myself doing this to protect the residents and everyone else. I couldn't live with myself not protecting the residents and staff and everyone else, and then something happens. And lo and behold, they've never had to use it, and they only came close once. So really good training.
De-escalation tactics.
Yeah. And they have good relationships with the people that live there. I mean, that's the other thing is they have really good relationships, and so it is a safety piece. And I would argue as much for what happens outside of the property, probably more what happens outside of the property than what actually happens in the property. And I can personally speak to where we were there. The issue that started at the property was handled pretty quick. The issue that came upon us after they handled it, that blew up, was not somebody who lived at the property and created total chaos in the parking lot.
Nothing else? Nothing else. All right. Harold? All right. Okay, open it up to the rest of you. You want any?
Do you want to talk about the org chart really quick? Just acknowledge it.
I think she did.
We mentioned it when we were talking about your new hires.
Yeah, so that is an updated org chart that shows the flow. It does include the HCI staff because they're sort of managed by
Well,
Molly.
it includes everybody that circles around LHA to make LHA happen, and how the housing group generally is put together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking I had an old one of these, which...
Nothing's changed structurally, but just people have been updated there. So.
And we are actively seeking a third clinician for the suites. So that will be a new addition as well, once we find somebody. It's a clinician too. So we upped the position from a clinician 1. And hoping to get that person in and start working with the team, which will allow the 2 current clinicians working for Brianna who are funded through the city to do more actual city-wide outreach and start working more in the community while maintaining the level of care that we've seen and want to keep at the suites, because the clinician that we're funding will primarily focus on residents of the suites.
Financially, we didn't have to get any more money from LHA. The city council, they had 50% of the marijuana tax went to mental health. The other 50% went to housing. And we within their approval is also supportive services. So instead of LHA having to fund the difference to go to from clinician 1 to clinician 2, we're bringing in the city funding to fund that difference. And then I think we still have some money available that we're thinking about maybe adding another clinician at some point once we can see what the numbers will look like for this year. And that's really to then, they've created what Christina has what they're calling is a mental health center of excellence, where the clinicians are meeting with senior services, youth services, core lead in that group. And we're now starting to elevate as we bring more capacity in terms of how do we now start reaching out to the broader community and supporting these issues. Hopefully, if we can get a couple more staff members, we'll start bringing this out to, again, Sarah's group on private landlords and what we can do.
So these clinicians are supervised by the senior center?
Christina.
Pardon me?
Christina.
Check on
Human
Yeah.
services, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Well, if there's nothing else, I need a motion to adjourn.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn.